You are listening to the Intelligent Vocalist Podcast, episode 101.
Welcome to the Intelligent Vocalist with John Henny. This is the podcast dedicated to help you be a smarter, better, more informed singer. And now, your host for the Intelligent Vocalist, John Henny.
Hey there, this is John Henny. Welcome back to another episode of The Intelligent Vocalist. I do so appreciate you spending your precious listening time with me. Hey, if you're on Instagram, well, so am I. And what I'm doing, I've taken a radical approach. I'm not taking pictures of my reclining feet with the beach in the background. I have yet to snap a photo in my latest hot outfit while sporting duck lips. No, I'm actually putting up little videos of singing tips. They're almost like little micro podcasts, if you were. So if you want to go to @JohnHennyVocals over there on that Instagram machine, you can find my videos. I'd love to see you there. All right, let's jump into muscular coordination for singing. And I'm going to specifically talk about the muscles of the vocal folds or your vocal cords. Remember, if you want to sound smart, you say vocal folds. If you want to sound a little less smart, you say vocal cords. And then if you really want voice teachers to pounce all over you, you spell chords with an H. That will instantly get you in trouble. Oh my gosh, I remember I had the first time I had someone transcribe a podcast episode, and I just threw it up without reading it, and that was totally on me. And they spelt chords with an H, and like I almost had a heart attack. Not because to me it's not that big a deal, and you'll actually see people like, I've seen journalists use it with an H, but oh man, my particular peer group does not suffer certain things lightly, and that's one of them. So I was able to change it. Someone alerted me to it before I got flogged too badly. So we're going to talk about these muscles of the vocal folds. Now, you have basically two pairs of muscles. You have the muscles, and you'll know this if you've been listening to my podcast for a while, but you have the muscles that are within the vocal folds themselves. And these are called, for the big word of the day, thyroid muscles, often abbreviated to TA. And essentially, the reason they're named is they're attached to your thyroid cartilage, which is that bump at the front of your neck that moves up and down when you swallow. They're attached just inside there. And then at the back, they're attached to these little things called the arytenoid cartilages. And they're like little pyramids at the back of the vocal folds. And they move apart in order for your vocal cords to open. And they come together for your vocal cords to close. And we name muscles based on where they attach. So there are these muscles are attached at the thyroid and the arytenoids, and so they're called thyroid muscles. Now, these muscles make your cords, when they flex, they make your cords nice and big and fat, and they give you those big, loud, juicy speaking tones and what's often called your lower register, your chest voice. Or if you want to get really fancy, as we're moving more towards scientific language, because the language of singing is very blurry. So that is being called Mode 1 or M1. So if you're reading any singing literature and you see someone referring to M1, they're talking about the chords being nice and big and fat and juicy. Now, you have a second pair of muscles, and these are called the cricothyroid muscles. And what these muscles do is they are attached to the thyroid cartilage, but they're attached to the outside now, and then they're attached to this thing called the cricoid cartilage, which sits below. And when this muscle flexes, it pulls this thyroid cartilage forward and down. And because your vocal folds are attached to the back of this movement begins to stretch them. So as we flex these cricothyroid muscles or CT muscles, the cords get longer and thinner. Now, that is when you're CT dominant, that is known as often head voice, upper register, some will call it falsetto, And the newer term is M2 or mode 2. So we have M1 and M2. And the problem for us singers is switching from one to the other when we don't want to. We will go from a TA dominant sound, which is going to be a very strong, robust sound, and as we go higher, we will often suddenly shift into a CT dominant sound. And in the CT dominant sound, the chords are longer, they're thinner, and there's less contact. They don't come together as intensely. And so it creates a less robust sound. It's the difference between hey and whoo. And the problem is when we're moving back and forth, hey, we get that crack in the voice. And one of the prized things in contemporary singing, one of the great skills is being able to belt those really strong high notes. Now, as you go higher, the CT muscles have to become more engaged and more involved. They have to begin to stretch and thin out those vocal folds for pitch. Otherwise, you're just going to get stuck. And I'm sure all of you have felt that when you go and try and belt a note and and it just jams up and you can't go any further and it just feels like you're shouting. And there's an acoustic element to that, but we're going to leave that alone today. I'm going to talk about the muscle coordination. So what's happening is the TA muscles are overengaged and the CT muscles aren't engaging enough. Now, muscles tend to like to be either on or off. And it's this idea of we're moving from the TA to the CT, and we'll get the pitch. If you do this abrupt shift, you're going to get the pitch, but it's not going to maintain the quality you often want for contemporary singing. Now, if you want to flip, if you want to do a stylized kind of hey, then certainly you can allow that to happen on purpose. But for the most part, especially when you're trying to belt or sing very intensely, we need the TA muscles to stay very active, but not so active that they stop us from getting to the pitch. So we need the CT muscles to engage, but not overtake so much that the chords become over thin. So how do you do this? How do we work this out? Well, this is something this takes time, and this takes obvious practice. Very often, you will be helped greatly by a voice teacher who can guide you through this process, because the process is likely not going to happen overnight, and you're going to have this instability of the coordination for a while, and this smooth handover from the one pair to the other pair is not likely going to happen right away. The problem is singers tend to get impatient. They just want to belt, so they will take this TA dominant configuration, or that's over dominant by the TA, and they will just push and shove and try and work that up into pitch. And that becomes a problem, because then you start to overmuscle the folds. You start going into the acoustic alignment of shouting, which then signals your body to use more muscle, because that's a survival mechanism that we're hardwired to do. That becomes a real issue. And then we just start shoving and pushing and yelling, and the chords are just slamming together, and they'll swell a little bit because our tissue doesn't like being slammed together, and you may feel tired, hoarse after singing. It may even hurt a little bit, and you have to know that's not good, and that's not sustainable. So what is our other option? Well, for a little while, going light is our other option, and that is the preferable option as you are developing your voice. Because in some developing singers, it's actually pretty common, especially amongst men, where the CT muscles are really underdeveloped and really weak. We don't use the extremes. The average person isn't using this CT dominant sound very much, except for when they occasionally go, woohoo! But to get that stretch and that pull, that's something that we need to work in. So for a little while, the voice, it may really fall apart to almost nothing. You may get or you'll get and I've had singers where it just doesn't even begin to engage. The TA is just over-engaged. So to offset that, you're going to have to make really light sounds for a little while. And even breathy is fine. And what you can do is just on some glides. And it is helpful. And you can start on an ah or an ah, and then just round your lips as you go higher to an oo. And work that back and forth until you start being able to access that upper range. And then you can just take the whole thing on an oo and see if you can give it a little more chord to the sound. Ooh. And with that really narrow ooh, that will tend to dial down the break. The break is going to be more pronounced on the more open vowels. So for a while, stay on those narrow vowels. You can stay on oo. If you're really having trouble, you can add a little light consonant. Coo, goo, woo is a good one with the W, the diphthong, if you will. Woo, woo, and that little oo, oo, oo is really going to narrow it down. Woo, 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 and you start to get that back and forth. Then you want to start activating a little more of that TA muscle. And this is where you have to be patient. This is where you can't rush this, because the TA muscle is the bully muscle, and it will, as soon as you go to give it a little bit, it will tend to overgrab. So you want to gently bring that in. Exercises that I found that do it really well as you start to step in, little edgy sounds. And even though that's very, very light, you're starting to step towards that more robust coordination. And then you can start to work in, open the vowel slightly and put a hard G, and that little sense of that, some people call it a cry, that edge. And you can and you start to get a little more intensity and a little more intensity. And then once that's working, then we can really start to open things up. So g can start to go to g. They can start to go to ma. And then rather than going ma, 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 mum, you can start ma, 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 mum. And on that top, I've got a little more of that a little more of that TA involvement. Now, if you want to know what that feels like, because we don't have direct awareness or conscious control over these TA and CT muscles, right? It's not like flexing your bicep. It's a little abstract. So just go ahead and almost kind of like a cow, without the moo, just that and you can feel a little more intensity there. Some singers will call it press, that resistance. Now, again, you gotta be careful because it can so very quickly, and it will overload very, very fast. If you feel the muscle begin to overload, it's okay. It's natural. Take 2 steps back. Go back to the last slightly more intense coordination that was working. Maybe it's the like goo, 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 or some exercise like that before you go back to the more open, more intense sounds. But as that begins to work, then you can start playing with more open vowels, more intensity, more resistance. Now, just a quick note on breathing. As you begin to have more resistance, you're also going to want to flow a little more air, a little more air pressure or air flow coming up against the resisting chords. Because if you don't give that enough airflow, then you're not going to be in balance and you're going to likely go towards that squeeze. Again, working with a voice teacher is really, really helpful. You will save so much time and so much frustration. If you can find a really good voice teacher, and it's worth the extra money to get a great voice teacher, because they're just going to save you time, and they're ultimately going to save you money, because you're saving a few dollars with a teacher that's not as experienced or trained. It's just going to take you more lessons if you're going to get there. So do your research on vocal coaches. Ask singers that you know. Check to see students they've worked with. One of my very first podcasts was on how to find a voice teacher, so you can check that out. And then you can start to apply this to material. As you apply it to material, do the melody first on an exercise that works for you. So don't just jump in and start trying to belt out the words. The problem with words are the composer is not worried about vocal technique or how hard it is for you. The composer has other demands that they are trying to meet, and it's not about making it super easy for you. And certain words are going to be harder to get this coordination on than others. So if you find a sound that really works for you, do the melody on that. Find your coordinations and then start adding in the words. You may find that you'll get, let's say there's a phrase, it has 8 words in it, and 2 of the words just aren't holding. They're either wanting to flip to that light coordination, or they're starting to shout. So what you do is you do all the other words on the actual text, and then when you come to those 2, substitute the exercise sound that's working for you. Ultimately, you should be able to start putting in all the words, add more intensity. You can start building that belt, but you need to practice patience when you are doing this. What you don't want to do is build in the muscle memory of shouting, of building in the coordinations of shouting, because that can be really hard to undo. And I have worked with singers who've done a lot of shouting in that area in their upper notes. And even as I attempt to get them balanced and I get the vowels lined up and we start backing off, man, the nervous system just doesn't want to let go of that. I call it the little ghosts in the machine. And they just keep reappearing. And even if they back off the muscle, then all of a sudden there's just too much air being shoved because their body is so used to having to labor and push through that. Your voice just isn't going to respond well to that pushing. Now, there are those of us whose vocal folds can withstand more abuse than others, but it's never really a great sound. And you know what? It's not fun to do. When you're really laboring, when you're singing and you're worried about notes coming up, man, that really isn't my favorite way to spend a day, is singing poorly. It's frustrating. And if it's in front of an audience, it's actually a little scary. And you will find as your vocal technique improves, so does your confidence. And things like stage fright actually begin to diminish in light of your new confident powers in singing. So take your time. This is worth it to do it right. You don't want to rush this. So there's my little vocal tips for you. Just know about the TA and the CT muscles, and then developing that coordination so you're not letting one over-dominate the other, but you find this really cool balance. And then you can play with those balances depending on how intensely you want to sing. It's all good stuff. Hey, if you want more information about me, you can check out my website, johnhenny.com. If you're interested in learning how to teach voice, well, I've got a couple of things for you. My book, Teaching Contemporary Singing, is currently on sale on Amazon Kindle for just 99 cents. And I have my Contemporary Voice Teacher Academy is now open. You can go to my website and just click Teacher Training up in the menu, and you can get the information on that there. You can also check out on Lessons with Me. I will put in the show notes, I'm currently doing a special where if you will commit to weekly lessons, I just have it open for a select group of people. But if you can commit to weekly lessons, you will get a substantial discount off my rate. I've set aside a small portion of my schedule in order to work with really serious singers who maybe normally couldn't afford my rate. Just go to johnhenny.com/101 for episode 101, and there'll be a link for the monthly commitment special. And hey, until next time, to better singing. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.